Hi, I'm Wendy Garrido. I help 6- and 7-figure business owners show up more authentically in every aspect of their life. And today we're going to talk about something that's a little personal to me. It's about showing up authentically in our physical relationships with people, as in like when we are touching, kissing, making out, having sex, whatever. So as the title of this video suggests, this is what I put together because I want my daughter to know this as she steps into romantic relationship with people. And so this is not like how sex works or STI conversation. I feel like you can Google that and you can find that pretty damn easily. But what this is about is like the hard-earned lessons that I have learned in terms of how to show up authentically in my romantic relationships in a way that makes it so fun and beautiful and pleasurable and takes care of me and the other person, but like takes care of me in ways that I won't regret later on what I did, or that make me feel overly vulnerable in ways that then I get hurt later on and regret what I did. Same thing. So just to kind of get clear, what I mean by getting physical, it could be anything from like holding hands with someone or giving or receiving massage to kissing somebody for the first time or the 100th time, making out with them, or having sex, like anything in those realms. And there's a lot of nuance in between those things. What I'm not going to go into in this video too much is like kink or consensual non-consent. Like I would consider those advanced topics that you wouldn't think I would even include in a video about what I want my 12-year-old daughter to know about getting physical. However, if you don't know, or at least her and her friends, like those are topics that they know about. And so it's not going to be the topic for this video, but perhaps another one. The metaphor that we're going to use today, because my daughter recently introduced me to Formula One racing, which I am excited, like very intrigued by. And also it lines up very nicely with the metaphor that I have always used for myself. So basically, I want you to think about it as your body is the car that you're driving. And you, your mind, your emotions, you are the driver of your car. So you get to decide where the car goes, you get to decide how fast it goes, you get to decide what it does, and you are also in charge of figuring out how to care for both yourself, your emotional well-being, and your car, your physical well-being. So if you're engaging with someone else, then you can think of that other person as a passenger. Like you get to invite them to be a passenger, well, in your car, but they're like riding along with you, right? So you get to decide if they're in the car with you and how long they stay in the car with you, and also whether or not you take into account their desires, right? So obviously you can't be doing something to them and their car that they are not consenting to, but just because they're in the passenger seat of your car, which really means like they're in the room with you or on the call with you, that they can tell you what they want, but you're the fucking driver and you don't have to listen to them, right? Like you, I think by now, my daughter, know that, but I'm just reminding you, they're the passenger and you're in charge of what you do with your body. In my ideal world, the best drives, you need to have a green light in order to go and to move in your car, right? So making out, engaging with someone physically or romantically or sexually should always feel good to you. And I think that maybe like, I feel like you might think like, oh, duh, but a lot of the time, and you can talk to a lot of different people, they actually don't enjoy sex or making out or the acts that they are doing. or sometimes it's like actually painful. So I want you to remember that making out and having sex should always feel good. And by always, I mean 99% of the time. Like maybe, like if I were giving you a massage or you're giving me a massage, like it might be you hit a sore spot and I'm like, ouch, and then you change it and then we're back to feeling good, right? But it's not like I'm like suffering in silence or like I want to have the trust with the person who's giving me that massage that I can tell them the second that doesn't feel good to me and that they will respond to that. So sometimes if you're like at a nail salon or when I've gotten massages, sometimes for whatever reason, like I feel a little scared or I don't tell the person right away. In my romantic relationships and in your romantic relationships, you should always feel safe enough with the person that you can tell them the instant that something stops feeling good to you and that you stop enjoying it. When I say feels good to you, what I mean is that parts of your body, especially private parts, may feel warm, tingly, hard, or slippery. But I want you to be enjoying the sensations of your body. And in a way that makes you want to keep doing the thing that you're doing and to feel like it's like you want more. You want more expansiveness. Maybe you want to feel closer to the person. You don't always have to have more. You can stay right with where you are. But it's where you're feeling good about what's happening and not like checked out in your head, cautious, or not enjoying it. We'll get into that, but those are signs to stop. Good physical engagement, whether it's just stroking somebody's hand or full out having sex with them, I want you to feel lost in the moment of how pleasurable and delightful it feels on your body and in your body. So if you think about like laying in the sun on a warm rock or on a warm side, like pavement next to the pool or whatever, and just like the physical sensory pleasure of that, or taking a hot shower, or even like when you really have to go pee and then you pee and you're just like, it feels so good. Like physical, pleasurable, lost in the moment sensation is what I want for you in all of your physical interactions with people. That whatever you're doing, it's not because you're doing it as a favor for somebody else, or you're either like doing something for them or letting them do something to you because they want. I want it to be because you actually enjoy it, and it's because it's what you want. So that when you're in that mode, when you are feeling pleasurable and it feels good and you're enjoying what you're doing, or maybe even wanting more, to me, that's the green light. Like, I want you to have that in your life as much as you want and can have. You can have a green light, but the question is, how fast do you go, right? Like, how much ground are you covering and how quickly? And I find that the very first time that I'm either doing something for myself ever, or that I'm doing something with someone new, I'm always going to move slower than if it's the 100th time that I've done something with someone, and that's okay. So it's important to move at the pace of the slowest person. And maybe that's you, maybe that's the other person, but to really pay attention to your body's signals and to not feel like because the other person wants more than you, that you have to like hurry up and do something that you don't want to do. I don't want you to move faster than you have built trust with the person. And I'll talk more in a minute about how you build trust with them. But it's at the beginning of a relationship is when it's a really good idea to kind of start out going slowly, right? You're learning yourself. You're learning the car. You're learning if you want to keep this passenger around with you and whether you trust them in terms of the directions that they give you or where they want to go and how your car and how you are going to hold up if you follow along with their lead. So at the beginning, Go slow. And by the beginning, it could be the first fucking 3 years of your life, or it could be the first 3 days that you're relating with somebody. But move at your own pace, and or the slowest. If the other person is feeling slower, then you move at their pace, and you pay attention to your body's signals and realize that it is possible to go from 100%, like you're totally enjoying it, to all of a sudden something happens and something changes and you want to stop, and you just want to put the brakes on and stop half a second later. That's okay. And it's important to honor that and communicate that. Sometimes it might be that, like, oh, well, the person is stroking your arm and it feels so nice, but then they move over and they get a little close to your chest, and all of a sudden you're like, hey, we didn't talk about this. That feels scary. So then you stop. It's like that. When you go from that moment of like pleasure to like, that means it's time to stop. Pause. It doesn't mean you have to stop for good, but at least to pause. Don't do anything before you really want to do it. It seems obvious, but it's not always. And it's easy for somebody else to feel like, oh, well, this person wants it, so I should do it. Or I want to do it because they want it. But I don't want you to do anything until you actually want that. And it could be something that you're doing for them or to their body, but do it because you actually want to do it, not because you think you should want to do it because they want to do it. And when you do feel yourself wanting to do something, especially at the beginning, let yourself exist in that state of wanting for a while before you actually do the thing, right? So this helps you make sure that you do actually want it. It helps you gives you time and space to process your feelings. So let's say that you're hugging somebody and it feels really great, and all of a sudden you realize you kind of want to kiss them. You don't have to kiss them right in that moment. You don't have to tell them that right in that moment, but you could if you want to. But you don't have to act on that. Like, give yourself some time. This is up to you to decide the pacing, but it might be 30 seconds, but it could also be like a day or two, especially when you're young and starting out. And to realize like, oh yeah, I do want to kiss this. And like, make sure that that's what you want. And check in with yourself about, am I ignoring red flags? We'll get into red flags in a minute. But am I like ignoring these things in my desire for this? Or have I really not had any red flags and this feels like a good desire for me? So don't do anything before you want to do it, but give yourself time wanting things before you actually act on them. And communicate with words to get mutual consent before doing anything new with anybody. And this is not something that most people do. It's something that you don't often see in the movies. Like in the movies, they're like, oh, they're all close and they're passionate, and then they just kiss. It's always better to slow things down and make sure that you're both on board with things and not rushing things. So if you feel like you want to kiss somebody, then you could say, I feel like I want to kiss you. How do you feel about that? And like, make sure that, like, have a conversation before you move into new territory, right? So if you think about it as like, there's a passenger in your car and you're driving around roads that you know well, that's fine. But if you two are deciding to go down a road that you don't know what is, like, you've never been down this road before, then it's good to make sure, like, hey, are you game to try this new thing, or game to go down this road that we don't quite know what it is? Like, yeah, okay, great, let's do it together. So verbal consent is really important, and it will, if the person you're with is not being patient or asking for your verbal consent, we'll get into that, but to me that's a bit of that is a red flag. But and to say, like, if you ask someone, or if they ask you if they can do something or if they want to do something, pay attention to the nuances. If you find yourself saying, I guess, or like, sure, that's not the same as, yes, I really want that. And so an I guess or a sure are not full consents. They're not like hell yeah. This is where it comes in. Like if it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no, right? So if you're not sure about it, it's okay to say, I don't know. Let me think about that and get back to you. Or I'm not sure right now. Can we just keep doing what we're doing, right? So words and communication before you engage physically is what will create a safe container for you to be able to feel comfortable being lost in the moment and experiencing the pleasure. Okay, so that's what I have to say about the speed and pacing of how you're progressing through things. And it might be like moving from, I really look at it as like, it's like you're driving through a city and at every intersection there's a traffic light, right? And so sometimes the traffic light is, I can see it's green, right? So if we're holding hands and then I'm like, I feel good about stroking someone's arm, and so then I might say, is it okay if I stroke your arm up here or something like that? Or kind of get clear, like, is there any place, are you okay with me like stroking parts of your body that are not private parts or something like that, right? Or like you can kind of communicate about where are the boundaries that we are okay playing inside together. And this is where I have kind of a playground metaphor, which is a little bit different than the driving metaphor. But it's like there could be this whole playground that is possible for you to engage with this person. But like for right now, you're just going to start out in one area of the playground. And then you're going to communicate before you like drive to another part of the playground and include that. It's a big playground. I'm not sure about my metaphor. But, and so sometimes if I lose trust with somebody, I might be like, actually, those things that we were doing that did feel good to me, it feels like that part of the playground is shut off right now. I don't feel comfortable doing that right now, but we can still do these things. These things still feel good to me, and let's play over here. And that's okay. Oh, one other thing on the speed topic is I call it naming the flies in your head. So if you think about it and you're like driving and there's this fly buzzing around in the car distracting you, it makes it really hard to focus on the road and focus on how you're feeling and what you're wanting. And so the flies in your head, it might be a thought that's distracting you. It could be as simple as like, oh my God, I forgot I have homework. There's literally a fly. Did you see that? There's literally a little fly buzzing around in here right now. A thought that's distracting you, like, oh, I just remembered I have homework I need to do later, right? Or it could be a feeling that you're having, like, oh, I was feeling good, but then you said this thing and now I don't feel good. And this is in your head. And you might, like, the physical thing could still be happening, right? The person might still be stroking your arm, and you were lost in the moment of it, but now there's this fly in your head that is saying like, hey, I didn't like what they said. But it could also be something good or like something that you want to do, right? Like, oh, like we're making out and you realize this feels really good. I want to put their hand on my chest, right? But this is in your head, but you're not doing it yet, but you're distracted and you're not really present and enjoying what's happening right now because there's this fly in your head. Or it could be a fear that you're having, right? Like, I want to do this thing, but I'm afraid that I'm not going to enjoy it and I might want to stop or whatever. So naming the flies in your head and like telling the other person that thought or that feeling honors yourself and your feelings, and it will help you get back to being present in the moment so that you can get back into the pleasure and the green and having a green light again. But if there is a fly in your head, like the thought that pops in that you can't really, sometimes I'm like, I don't want to have to say it. I don't need to say that. It's not a big deal. But it's stuck in my head and it keeps me from being present and enjoying the moment. So name the flies in your head. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about are the red lights, right? So this is when your body is telling you to stop. So it's the minute that you stop enjoying whatever it is that's happening, or if you get a pit in your stomach where you're like, ugh, or your body, you kind of feel your body like tense up or freeze, or you feel scared, or something hurts, or something they say feels a little bit off and doesn't make you feel like 100% good and safe. Or suddenly it might just be like an urge to like cover up and put your sweatshirt back on or something like that. Or you feel like you like want to get away and have distance and you want to leave the room or get off the couch or whatever it is. So that impulse that you have inside of you, that is a red light, and that means it's time to stop. It doesn't mean the drive is over necessarily if you don't want it to be, but it means, hey, stop here and check in with yourself and wait until there's a green light again before you move forward. So when you get that red light and you see like, oh, I don't have a green light, I have a red light, I need to hit the brakes. So what does it mean to hit the brakes? It could be like, you could be saying, no, I don't want to do that. You could say, wait. You could say, stop. Or I changed my mind. Or this doesn't feel good. Or stop, that hurts. Or you could also say, could you do this instead? And it's also okay to just push the person off of you if it doesn't feel good to you, or to push them away from you. So you don't have to if it was an extreme situation and you kick them in the nuts, but if it's, well, and even if they don't have nuts, it's still a good spot to kick. But even like not that extreme, just if something suddenly doesn't feel good to you and you're not mad at the person even necessarily, but you need space, it's okay to physically push them away. And also, obviously, if they are like physically restraining you in a way that you don't enjoy, it's okay to physically hurt them, like protective use of force to protect yourself. So just a reminder. And anytime that you hit the brakes, and it's good, I don't purposely do this as a test at the beginning, but when you really pay attention to how you're feeling and you honor the flies in your head, the red lights that come up, you get to learn how that person is responding to you. And if they're listening to you, and if they're feeling patient with you, and if they're being supportive and willing to wait. And anything other than being supportive and patient, to me, is a red flag. And I think it should be a red flag for you too. So, when we talk about red flags, to me, the red flag, as you know, it means the race has been stopped due to unsafe conditions or an incident that has happened. So a red light might turn into a green light as soon as you name the fly, or ask for something to be different, or say how you're feeling. But a red light could also turn into a red flag where you decide, I don't want to engage with this person probably ever. Like either if it's a red flag, it's not going to change. And so it's not worth, in my opinion, trying again a week later. Just like that red flag is not going to go away. So if they were not listening to you, don't keep engaging with this person. Find someone who will listen to you at those levels. So red flags could be if someone is pressuring or asking you to do anything that doesn't feel good or right to you. So sometimes they might be coming across as passive aggressive. So sometimes this is like, someone's like, well, no, you said you didn't want me to touch you that way, so now I'm not going to touch you at all. Gross, right? That's not honoring your needs and your desires. It's being passive aggressive. So if they show up that way, major red flag. Like, don't continue, from my perspective, don't continue a romantic relationship with this person. Stand up for yourself and take care of yourself. Another red flag is manipulation. So if somebody, and I literally had someone tell me this, like, well, if you really liked me, you would do this. And the minute you hear that, like, ding, 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 that's a red flag. Another way would be that they're like, well, if you do this or if you don't do this, I'm going to tell, right? Like a threat, making a threat to manipulate you that, oh, they're going to tell your anything, tell the other kids at school or tell your partner or tell your parents or whatever. Like, don't be threatened or manipulated. But also begging or pleading. And I don't care like how horny teenage kids can be. If somebody's like, oh, pretty please, you don't understand what it's like for me. Later on, if you want to get kinky and make them beg, totally different topic. But somebody like begging you to do something that you don't feel 100% great about doing is a red flag. Also, if they blame you at all, that's a red flag. So, for example, they might say like, well, if you didn't want me to feel this way, you shouldn't have kissed me, made out with me, done whatever, you know? Like if they are blaming you for their experience as a means of pressuring you to do something, ew, gross, red flag, stop. Similarly, this is a little bit like the passive aggressiveness, but if you feel like they're like punishing you or emotionally shutting you out because you said no, or you asked to slow down, or you stopped, or you don't want to do something, major red flag, right? And obviously, if they're not listening to you, and if they're not stopping when you ask them to stop, or if they act at all impatient with you, like a lot of times people are like, oh, you're ruining the moment by, like if you want to say what the flag is in your head, or if you want to verbally like make sure you get consent and talk about it. And they're like, oh, you're ruining the passion of the moment. Like that is a red flag, because here's the thing. Your moment, if you have a fly in your head, that moment is already ruined for you. Like not ruined permanently, but you don't have a green flag, right? So you're not going to go unless you both have green flags. If they're being impatient with you, and that is a red flag. And also, if they are not communicating before doing something new. Now, not everybody has the luxury of having parents who talk to them at this level about things. So it might be that you say, hey, I really would like to make sure that we talk about things and verbally consent before we cross new boundaries in our physical relationship. Is that okay with you? And they say yes, right? Then fucking hold them to it. And they should be communicating with you about it. So ideally, I would like it to be they already come to you with this value and priority on consent and communication. If you need to just make the statement once, then that's fine. But if they agree to that and then they don't communicate about it, that's a red flag. And also, if they don't check in with you immediately after doing something new, right? So let's say that you say you want to kiss them and they say, yeah, let's do it. And then you kiss. Like at some point, you both should check in, but it's nice if they also check in with you and say, how was that for you? Especially, so a lot of this is especially if they are more experienced than you are. If you are both equally inexperienced, then you might be the leader in terms of these types of communications or what's happening. But in general, if someone is not checking in with you and asking, like, how are you doing? How did this go for you? How is this feeling to you? On a regular basis, and immediately after you do something new, then that's a red flag, in my opinion. Now, eventually, you can build trust and rapport with someone where you don't have to have all of this verbal communication, because you can have in the blink of an eye, or with the blink, like in a flash of your facial expressions, you can read each other and understand what's going on and feel if that's a yes or a no or what they're wanting. But that is what comes with building trust with somebody. It's not what happens right off the bat. And when we make assumptions like that about how other people are feeling, or when we let them make assumptions about how we are feeling, it starts to make this like separation where we don't feel as connected to them, and it can feel alone, like alone in your head, because you're having this feeling or experience that you're not getting to share with them. And that type of disconnection will keep you from being able to experience the pleasure that is a green light. So I think that's mainly what I have on this topic. So the last thing that I want to talk you through is this concept of the wheel of consent. So it's really important to understand these concepts so that when the time comes, in my opinion, you don't need it and you can throw it out the window. But this is really important. Like when you have the really good, really safe, intimate physical connection, then this doesn't necessarily apply. But for everything else and all of the other physical interactions that you might have, or that you might start out with someone and then realize it's a red light and it's a red flag and you don't want to continue with them, these are really helpful. So the basic idea of the wheel of consent is that there's a person who is doing something and there's a person who is receiving the thing that's being done, right? So it could be that you are doing the massaging and I am receiving the massaging, or it could be a sexual act, right? Like, so you're going down on the person and the other person is receiving you going down on them, right? Hopefully this is a little bit down the road for you, child. But, and then the question is it for you or is it for them? So, and this is where like the sleazy ways that it can happen is like dudes are like, oh, can I give you a massage? And they're like doing it, but they're actually like, they're enjoying it, but you're not actually enjoying it. But they're acting like you're supposed to be enjoying this massage that they're giving you, but you actually aren't. So this is where it can get really confusing and fucked up, right? And also, so there's this circle here, which is the circle is consent. So the same thing, like it's not about the physical act that happens. It's about whether there's consent or not in terms of how we experience it, right? For any act, it could be that, right? So let's take the kind of stereotypical, right? Like the guy wants the girl to give him a blowjob. So often what it gets to be is the woman feels like she is doing it for him, right? Let's say that the woman, so you are doing it, but you're not doing it because you really want to. That could be over here, right? You could be like, oh my gosh, I've never done this before and I really want to try it. Can I? Right? Or they could even be like, oh, I've tried that. I don't really like that. Right? So it may not be that they want it, but it also might be that they want it. So are you doing this for yourself or are you doing it for them? And or is it something that they are doing for themselves or for you, right? So again, this is where it comes down often with men going down, or cis guys, I guess I would say, going down on people with vaginas, I guess I'll say. And but it's like it actually doesn't feel good, but the guy thinks, like, there's this whole thing that in the gross ways of the past that I hope is not part of your experience, where it's like, oh, the guy wants to like make himself feel good that he's like pleasuring his girlfriend, but it actually doesn't feel good to her. So that is not, like, it's really important to be clear on, wait a second, do you think that you're doing this for me? Because if you're doing this for me, then you need to listen to what would actually make it pleasurable for me. On the other hand, if I'm doing this for you, because then maybe I'm just letting you do this thing and it's not that pleasurable to me. I don't really like that. Gross. I hope that, to me, those are red flags and I would not want that. So there are people for whom this wheel of consent is their whole entire relationship of experience of sex. Like, oh, well, first I'm going to get you off for your pleasure, and then you're going to get me off for my pleasure. Or can I pleasure you in order to get myself off, right? Like, what I want for you and the only type of physical interaction or sex or making out that I choose to engage in is the kind where it collapses this. And the thing that I want is also the thing that the other person wants. And the thing that is bringing me pleasure is also the thing that is bringing them pleasure. And it's just really fucking good, and it feels good for both of us. And the minute that one of those, that either I'm not enjoying it as much, or they're not enjoying it as much, or I don't want to be doing it, or they don't want to be doing it, we stop and we change it. And it's this creative process. Like, you never really, when you are honoring your authenticity and you're engaging with somebody and you're listening to, like, oh, well, what is it that I want right now? Like, oh, I want a little bit more. What do I want to ask them for or tell them that I would like? And it's this creative process where you get to create this rich, beautiful, pleasurable experience with the person. And it can be different every time. And it's so delicious and amazing, and that's what I want for you. But I don't want you to just think that, like, sex or romantic relationship means you're doing favors for the other person or letting them do favors for you, or, like, it should be mutually pleasurable. But you can only be in charge of your own pleasure and your own boundaries and tracking your red lights and your green lights. So I think that's all I've got to say. I'm very curious to hear what you think about this, my daughter, and anyone else who's watching. And if you have any questions, or I would love to create a follow-up video too to address anything. You can Google the Wheel of Consent. There's other whole videos about it. It's really not like my area of expertise or anything, but I do think it's interesting, and it, like, made explicit this idea of, wait a second, just because you're giving me a massage doesn't necessarily mean that it's for my pleasure if you're wanting to do it. And so to get clearer on those things. Okay, I think that's all for now. Thank you so much. Take care. Big hugs. Lots of love. Bye-bye.